In a small town in Ohio, life moved at a slow and predictable pace. The streets were lined with modest houses, and the air carried the faint scent of freshly cut grass. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, or at least thought they did. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Clara Williams walked into her local grocery store, the same one she had been visiting for over 40 years. At 72 years old, Clara was a familiar face in the community. She was known for her warm smile, her neatly pressed dresses, and the way she always greeted people with a kind word. Clara wasn't shopping for anything special that day, just the usual items: bread, eggs, milk, and maybe a treat or two to share with her grandchildren when they came to visit. She pushed her cart down the aisles, carefully selecting what she needed. The store was busy but not crowded, filled with the hum of conversation and the occasional beep of the cash register. Everything seemed normal, just like any other day. But as Clara reached for a carton of milk, something unexpected happened. Two police officers entered the store. Their names were Adam Carter and Ryan Miller, and while they were relatively new to the town, their reputation preceded them. They had a history of being aggressive and confrontational, especially toward people of color. Clara didn't know them personally, but she had heard the stories. Still, she wasn't worried. She had done nothing wrong, and she had every right to be there. Adam and Ryan scanned the store, their eyes narrowing as they focused on Clara. Without hesitation, they approached her, their boots clicking loudly against the tiled floor. "Excuse me, ma'am," Adam said, his tone sharp and commanding. "We need to speak with you." Clara turned to face them, her expression calm but curious. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked politely. "We received a report," Ryan chimed in, his voice laced with suspicion. "Someone says you've been putting items in your bag without paying for them." Clara blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry, but that's not true. I haven't even taken my wallet out yet." She gestured to her purse, which was still securely closed on the seat of her shopping cart. Adam crossed his arms, his posture rigid. "Don't play games with us, lady. You fit the description perfectly." Clara frowned. "What description?" "I'm just here to buy groceries." Ryan stepped closer, his voice rising. "An older black woman wearing a blue dress. That's you?" "Isn't it?" Clara felt a knot form in her stomach. The description was so vague it could apply to almost anyone. She glanced around the store, hoping someone would step forward and confirm her innocence. But the other shoppers simply looked away, avoiding eye contact. Some pretended to be absorbed in their shopping lists, while others hurriedly moved to different aisles. No one wanted to get involved. "This is ridiculous," Clara said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly. "I haven't stolen anything. If you don't believe me, you can check my cart." Adam smirked, clearly unimpressed. "Oh, we will. But first, we need to take a closer look at you." He reached out and grabbed her arm roughly, pulling her away from the cart. Clara winced at the sudden pressure on her wrist. "Let go of me," she demanded, trying to pull away. "You're hurting me." "Stop resisting," Ryan snapped, moving to block her path. "If you've got nothing to hide, then this won't take long." The confrontation drew the attention of everyone in the store. Whispers spread like wildfire as shoppers watched the scene unfold. Some shook their heads in disapproval, while others muttered under their breath about how unfair the situation was. But no one dared to intervene. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. As Adam tightened his grip on Clara's arm, something strange began to happen. A faint blue light started to glow around her hands. At first, it was so subtle that only Clara noticed it. But within seconds, the light grew brighter, pulsating softly like a heartbeat. Clara froze, her eyes widening in shock. She hadn't expected this. Not here, not now. "What the hell is that?" Ryan exclaimed, taking a step back. His hand instinctively went to his holster, though he didn't draw his weapon. Adam stared at the glowing light, his confidence wavering. "Turn it off!" he barked, his voice tinged with panic. "Whatever you're doing, stop it right now." "I'm not doing anything," Clara protested, her voice trembling. She didn't understand what was happening either, but deep down, She knew it wasn't something she could control. The light continued to intensify, bathing the entire aisle in an eerie blue hue. The other shoppers gasped and murmured among themselves. Some pulled out their phones to record the bizarre phenomenon, while others backed away, fearing the unknown. Even the store employees hesitated, unsure of how to handle the situation. Finally, the light reached its peak, enveloping Clara completely. For a brief moment, everything seemed to stand still. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the glow faded, leaving behind a stunned silence. Clara stood there, her breathing heavy but steady. Her eyes locked onto Adam and Ryan, who looked utterly terrified. Without another word, Clara pulled, her arm free, and straightened her posture. She retrieved her shopping cart and proceeded to the checkout line as if nothing unusual had occurred. The crowd parted to let her pass, their expressions a mix of awe and confusion. Adam and Ryan remained rooted to the spot, too shaken to follow her. When Clara left the store a short while later, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes watching her, whispering questions she couldn't answer. What had just happened? Was it real or had they imagined it? One thing was certain. Life in the small Ohio town would never be the same again. By the time Clara Williams stepped out of the grocery store, the whispers had already begun. People who had witnessed the strange event couldn't stop talking about it. Some were convinced they had seen something supernatural, while others dismissed it as a trick of the light or a camera malfunction. Either way, the story spread quickly, fueled by the videos and photos captured by bystanders. By evening, the entire town was buzzing with speculation. Emily Dawson, a young journalist for the local newspaper, was one of the first to hear about the incident. She had been working on a slow news day when her phone started lighting up with messages from friends and colleagues. "Did you see what happened at the grocery store?" they asked. An old woman stood up to two cops and then, "Well, you have to see it for yourself." Intrigued, Emily pulled up the videos online. The footage was grainy, but it clearly showed Clara surrounded by a glowing blue light as the officers backed away in fear. Emily knew she had to investigate further. This wasn't just a random altercation. It was something bigger, something that could capture national attention. She decided to visit Clara's home the next morning, hoping to get her side of the story. As she drove through the quiet streets of the town, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Something about the whole situation felt off, like reality had shifted slightly out of place. Clara lived in a modest house on the edge of town, surrounded by tall oak trees and neatly trimmed hedges. When Emily knocked on the door, it took a moment before Clara answered. The elderly woman looked much the same as she had in the videos, calm, composed, and radiating an aura of quiet strength. Her gray hair was tied back in a bun, and she wore a simple floral dress that matched the cozy interior of her home. "Good morning," Emily said politely, holding up her notebook. "I'm Emily Dawson from the local paper. I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions about what happened yesterday." Clara studied her for a moment before nodding. "Come in," she said, stepping aside to let Emily enter. The inside of the house was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of fresh-baked cookies. Clara led her to the living room, where they sat down on a pair of comfortable armchairs. A pot of tea was already waiting on the coffee table, steam rising gently from the spout. "Thank you for seeing me," Emily began, pulling out her recorder. "First, can you tell me what happened at the store? From your perspective?" Clara sighed softly, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "It was nothing more than a misunderstanding," she said. "Those officers accused me of stealing, though. I hadn't done anything wrong. They treated me poorly, and when one of them grabbed my arm, something unexpected happened." Emily leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "The light," she prompted. "What was it?" Clara hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. "That's not easy to explain," she admitted. "But I suppose there's no harm in telling you the truth. You seem like someone who might understand." Over the next hour, Clara shared a story that left Emily speechless. According to Clara, she wasn't just any ordinary senior citizen. She belonged to a hidden lineage known as the Keepers, individuals born with latent abilities tied to ancient energies. These powers had been passed down through generations, meant to protect humanity from forces beyond its understanding. Clara explained that the glowing light witnessed at the grocery store was a defensive mechanism, an involuntary reaction triggered when she felt threatened. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Clara added, her voice soft but steady. "But those officers crossed a line. Their actions woke something inside me, something I haven't felt in years." Emily listened intently, scribbling notes as Clara spoke. Though the story sounded incredible, there was a sincerity in Clara's tone that made it hard to dismiss. "So you're saying this isn't the first time something like this has happened?" Emily asked cautiously. "No," Clara replied. "But it's rare. Most keepers live their entire lives without ever needing to use their abilities. We prefer to stay hidden, blending into society. It's safer that way. For us, and for everyone else." As the interview continued, Emily learned more about the responsibilities of the Keepers and the dangers they faced. Clara mentioned that awakening her powers might have unintended consequences, hinting at challenges yet to come. By the time Emily left the house, her mind was racing with questions and possibilities. She couldn't wait to write her article, knowing it would be unlike anything she had ever covered before. Meanwhile, Adam Carter and Ryan Miller were dealing with consequences of their own. Suspended pending investigation, the two officers had retreated to their homes, avoiding public scrutiny as best they could, but their behavior grew increasingly erratic. Both men complained of strange dreams and unexplained headaches, waking up in cold sweats after nights filled with vivid nightmares. In private conversations, they admitted to feeling watched by some unseen force, as if invisible eyes were following their every move. Word of these developments only fueled more speculation among the townspeople. Some believed the officers were suffering from guilt over their treatment of Clara, while others thought the glowing light might have cursed them. Whatever the truth, it was clear that the events at the grocery store had set something in motion, something no one fully understood. Back at the newspaper office, Emily typed furiously, piecing together her notes into a coherent story. She included quotes from Clara, descriptions of the glowing light, and reactions from witnesses. Before submitting the article, she double-checked her facts, ensuring everything was accurate. When the piece went live later that evening, it quickly gained traction, drawing comments and shares from readers across the country. In the days that followed, strange occurrences began to plague the town. Electrical grids flickered unpredictably, plunges into darkness lasting mere seconds but leaving residents uneasy. Streetlights buzzed and dimmed, casting eerie shadows on empty roads. Animals behaved oddly too. Dogs howled at nothing, cats refused to leave their hiding spots, and birds gathered in large flocks, circling aimlessly above rooftops. Even plants seemed affected, wilting overnight despite being watered regularly. Residents reported experiencing unsettling phenomena of their own. Many claimed to have vivid nightmares involving shadowy figures whispering in languages they couldn't understand. Others described hearing faint footsteps in empty rooms or seeing fleeting movements out of the corners of their eyes. The atmosphere grew tense, with people locking their doors earlier and glancing nervously over their shoulders as they walked down the street. Adam and Ryan weren't spared from these disturbances either. If anything, they bore the brunt of it. Their headaches worsened, accompanied by sharp pains behind their eyes. Whispers echoed in their ears, growing louder and more insistent. Shadows danced along walls, twisting into grotesque shapes that vanished when approached. One night, unable to sleep, the two officers decided to patrol near the outskirts of town, hoping the fresh air might clear their minds. Instead, they stumbled upon something that chilled them to the bone. As they drove past a dense cluster of trees, they noticed a group of shadowy entities hovering near the edge of the woods. The figures were humanoid but distorted, their forms shifting and rippling like smoke caught in a breeze. Adam slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Ryan reached for his flashlight, his hand trembling. "Let's not stick around to find out," he muttered, reaching for his radio. but static was all that came through no matter how many times he tried to call for backup. The entities turned toward them, their hollow eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Without thinking, Adam drew his weapon and fired a shot. The bullet passed harmlessly through one of the figures, dissipating like, "Missed, we need to get out of here," Ryan shouted, throwing the car into reverse. Tires screeched as they sped away, leaving the shadowy beings behind. Neither man spoke during the drive back to the station, their faces pale and drawn. They knew, deep down, that whatever they had encountered was connected to Clara and the glowing light. The events of that night marked a turning point. The officer's account spread quickly, adding fuel to the fire of rumors and fears sweeping through the town. People began to wonder if Clara's abilities were truly a blessing, or a curse. For better or worse, life in the small Ohio town had changed forever, and everyone was bracing themselves for what might come next. The days that followed the strange events at the grocery store and the officer's encounter with the shadowy entities brought a mix of fear, curiosity, and determination to the small Ohio town. Clara Williams knew she couldn't ignore what was happening. The glowing light that had surrounded her wasn't just a random occurrence, it was a sign. Something ancient and powerful had been awakened, and it was up to her to figure out why. Clara spent hours in her home, sitting quietly, in her favorite chair by the window. She stared out at the oak trees swaying gently in the breeze, her mind racing. Memories of her grandmother's stories came flooding back, tales of the keepers, their duties, and the forces they were meant to guard against. Her grandmother had always warned her about the dangers of using their abilities carelessly. "Power like ours is a gift," she used to say, "but it also comes with great responsibility. When you awaken it, you invite both protection and peril." Clara realized now that the confrontation with Adam and Ryan hadn't just been about defending herself. It had weakened the barrier between worlds, allowing something dark and malevolent to seep through. She didn't know how much time she had before the situation worsened, but she knew she couldn't face it alone. She needed help, from others like her. Reaching out to other keepers wasn't easy. They lived scattered across the country, hidden in plain sight, blending into ordinary lives. But Clara had kept in touch with a few over the years, exchanging letters and occasional phone calls. She pulled out an old address book from her desk drawer, its pages yellowed with age. Flipping through it, she found two names, Marcus Johnson and Evelyn Harper. Marcus was a retired mechanic living in Chicago. He had been part of the keeper lineage for decades, though he rarely spoke about it. Clara remembered him as a quiet man with strong hands and a steady heart. Evelyn, on the other hand, was a librarian from Detroit. Soft-spoken and bookish, she had always been more comfortable surrounded by words than people. Still, Clara trusted them both implicitly. She picked up the phone and dialed Marcus's number first. After a few rings, his deep voice answered. "Hello? Marcus, it's Clara," she said, her tone urgent. "I need your help." There was a pause on the other end. "Clara? What's wrong?" "I'll explain everything when you get here," she replied. "But I think we're facing something big. Can you come?" Marcus hesitated for a moment before agreeing. "I'll be there as soon as I can." Next, Clara called Evelyn. The woman sounded surprised to hear from her after so many years, but listened intently as Clara explained the situation. Like Marcus, Evelyn didn't ask too many questions. She simply promised to arrive within the next day. While waiting for her fellow keepers to arrive, Clara decided to reach out to Emily Dawson again. The young journalist had shown genuine interest in her story, and Clara believed transparency could help ease some of the fear spreading through the town. Besides, Emily had already seen glimpses of the truth. Keeping her involved might make things easier in the long run. When Emily arrived at Clara's house the following afternoon, she looked both excited and nervous. "You said you wanted to talk more?" she asked, clutching her notebook tightly. "Yes," Clara replied, gesturing for her to sit. "Things are escalating faster than I expected. I need you to understand what's really going on, and maybe help share that with others." Over tea, Clara explained the deeper implications of what had happened. She described the shadowy entities Adam and Ryan had encountered, emphasizing that these beings weren't natural. They were remnants of an ancient war between the Keeper's ancestors and a malevolent force seeking dominion over Earth. By awakening her powers, Clara had inadvertently weakened the barrier separating the two realms. Now, those entities were trying to break through, drawn by the energy released during the incident at the store. Emily listened intently, her pen moving quickly across the page. "So you're saying these creatures, are they dangerous?" she asked. "Very," Clara said gravely. "If they manage to cross over completely, they'll bring chaos and destruction. That's why we have to act fast." By the time Clara finished speaking, Emily's expression had shifted from skepticism to awe. "This is incredible," she murmured, "and terrifying. Are you sure you can stop them?" "We have to try," Clara said firmly. "That's why I've called others like me. Together we might stand a chance." Later that evening, Marcus and Evelyn arrived at Clara's house. The three keepers gathered in the living room, their faces serious as they discussed the growing threat. Marcus, tall and broad-shouldered, carried an aura of quiet strength. Evelyn, petite and bespectacled, radiated calm wisdom. Despite their differences, they shared a bond forged through their shared heritage. "We don't have much time," Clara began, cutting straight to the point. "The barrier is weakening and the entities are getting stronger. We need to reinforce it before it's too late." Marcus nodded. "How do we do that?" "There's a ritual," Evelyn said softly, pulling a leather-bound book from her bag. Its pages were filled with handwritten notes and diagrams. "It's risky, but it's our best option." Clara recognized the book immediately. It was one of the oldest texts passed down through the Keeper lineage, containing instructions for dealing with breaches like this. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the familiar symbols and incantations. "We'll need to channel our combined energy," she explained. "It won't be easy, and it'll take everything we've got. But if we succeed, we can seal the breach permanently." The group agreed to prepare for the ritual, dividing tasks among themselves. Marcus offered to gather supplies, a mixture of herbs, crystals, and candles, needed to create a protective circle. Evelyn volunteered to map out the location where the disturbances were strongest, based on reports from the townspeople. Clara, meanwhile, focused on teaching Emily how to document their efforts without putting herself in danger. As the days passed, the town grew increasingly uneasy. Strange occurrences became more frequent and panic began to spread. Cars stalled randomly in the middle of the road. Electronics malfunctioned, turning on and off without explanation. Children claimed to see shadowy figures lurking in their bedrooms at night. Even the weather seemed off, with sudden storms rolling in and disappearing just as quickly. Adam and Ryan, still reeling from their earlier encounter, found themselves at the center of the chaos. Their headaches intensified and the whispers in their ears grew louder, almost unbearable. Shadows followed them everywhere they went, twisting into grotesque shapes whenever they glanced away. Desperate for answers, they visited a local doctor, who ran tests but found nothing physically wrong with them. "It's all in your head," the doctor said finally, shaking his head. "Maybe stress or trauma from the incident at the store. Try to rest." But resting was impossible. Every night the officers lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the shadows crept closer. They knew, deep down, that whatever was happening wasn't psychological. It was real. And it was connected to Clara. Back at Clara's house, preparations for the ritual were nearing completion. Marcus returned with the necessary supplies, while Evelyn identified the edge of the woods near the outskirts of town as the epicenter of the disturbances. Clara felt a sense of relief knowing they were ready, but she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. On the eve of the ritual, the group met one last time to go over the plan. Clara addressed them with unwavering resolve. "Tomorrow, we face whatever's coming," she said. "Stick together, trust each other, and remember why we're doing this. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone in this town. And beyond." Evelyn nodded, her voice steady despite the weight of the task ahead. "We'll get through this," she said. "We have to." Marcus placed a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder. "You've led us this far," he said. We'll follow you to the end." As the meeting concluded, Emily lingered behind, watching the keepers with admiration. She had never met anyone like them. Ordinary people carrying extraordinary burdens. Though she wasn't a keeper herself, she felt honored to play a role in their mission. For the first time in her career, she understood the true power of storytelling, not just to inform, but to inspire. The next morning, the group set out for the woods, determined to confront the growing darkness. Little did they know, the battle they were about to face would test them in ways they couldn't imagine. Under the cover of night, Clara Williams and her fellow keepers, Marcus Johnson and Evelyn Harper, made their way to the edge of the woods. The air was cool and damp, carrying the earthy scent of leaves and soil. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale silver light over the trees. It was quiet, too quiet, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The group moved cautiously, their footsteps soft against the forest floor. Each of them carried a bag filled with supplies for the ritual: bundles of dried herbs, smooth crystals, and thick white candles. Clara led the way, her eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of movement. She could feel the energy around them, heavy and oppressive, like a storm waiting to break. "This is it," Evelyn whispered, stopping near a clearing surrounded by tall oaks. Her voice was barely audible, yet it carried a weight that made the others pause. "This is where the disturbances are strongest," Clara nodded, her expression grim. She set down her bag and began unpacking the items, arranging them in a precise circle on the ground. Marcus helped her, his large hands steady despite the tension in the air. Evelyn opened her leather-bound book, flipping to the page marked, with a faded ribbon. She held it close to her face, squinting in the dim light as she reviewed the steps of the ritual. "We need to work quickly," Clara said, lighting the first candle. Its flame flickered weakly at first, then grew stronger, casting a warm glow over the clearing. "The entities will sense us soon." Emily Dawson stood a short distance away, watching silently. Though she wasn't a keeper, Clara had insisted she come along to document the event. Emily clutched her notebook tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't fully understand what was about to happen, but she knew it was important, not just for the town, but for everyone. As the candles were lit one by one, the clearing transformed. The soft light created an aura of calm, pushing back the shadows that seemed to creep closer with each passing moment. Clara instructed Marcus and Evelyn to take their positions within the circle, forming a triangle with her at the center. Together they would channel their combined energy to reinforce the barrier between worlds. "Focus," Clara reminded them, her voice firm but gentle. "Think of the barrier as a wall. We're rebuilding it brick by brick. Visualize it growing, stronger with every breath." Evelyn closed her eyes, her lips moving silently as she recited the incantation from the book. Marcus mirrored her actions, his brow furrowed in concentration. Clara stood still, her hands raised slightly at her sides, palms facing outward. A faint hum filled the air, low and resonant, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. At first, nothing seemed to change. Then slowly a shimmering light began to form around the edges of the circle. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew brighter with each passing second. The light pulsed rhythmically, matching the beat of their hearts. Emily watched in awe, her pen hovering above the page as she struggled to capture the scene in words. But the peace was short-lived. As the light intensified, the forest around them came alive with sound. Twigs snapped under unseen feet. Leaves rustled violently, though there was no wind. Shadows darted between the trees, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes. The whispers returned, louder this time, filling the air with a cacophony of voices speaking in languages no one could understand. "They're here," Marcus growled, his body tensing as he stepped closer to the circle. His fists clenched at his sides, ready to defend his companions if necessary. "Stay focused," Clara commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't let them distract you." Evelyn's hands trembled, but she kept her eyes shut, continuing the incantation. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she poured every ounce of her strength into the ritual. Clara felt the strain too, her muscles burning as she channeled her energy into the growing barrier. The effort was exhausting both physically and mentally, but she refused to give up. The shadowy entities grew bolder, circling the clearing like predators stalking their prey. They pressed against the glowing boundary of the circle, their forms shifting and writhing as they tried to break through. Their hollow eyes glowed with malice, locking onto Clara and the others with unrelenting intensity. Emily backed away instinctively, her notebook falling from her grasp. She wanted to run, to escape the nightmare unfolding before her eyes, but something rooted her to the spot. Maybe it was the courage of the keepers standing firm despite the terror surrounding them. Or maybe it was the realization that running wouldn't save her. Not from this. "Clara!" Evelyn gasped, her voice strained. "They're breaking through." Clara opened her eyes, her gaze sharp and determined. She could see the cracks forming in the barrier, thin lines of darkness seeping through like oil spreading across water. If they didn't act quickly, the entities would overwhelm them. "Marcus!" she shouted. "We need more power." Without hesitation, Marcus stepped forward, placing his hands on Clara's shoulders. His energy surged through her, amplifying the light until it blazed like sunlight. Evelyn joined him, linking her hands with theirs. The three keepers became a single unit, their combined strength bolstering the barrier. The entities shrieked in anger, their voices piercing the night. They lunged at the circle, slamming against the glowing walls with enough force to shake the ground. For a moment it seemed like the barrier might collapse. But then, with a final burst of energy, the cracks sealed themselves, and the light expanded outward in a brilliant wave. When the light faded, the clearing was silent once more. The shadows were gone, banished back to the realm from which they had come. The oppressive weight in the air lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and renewal. Clara swayed on her feet, her legs threatening to give out beneath her. Marcus caught her before she fell, steadying her with a firm grip. "It's done," Evelyn whispered, collapsing to her knees. Her face was pale, her breathing ragged, but there was a look of relief in her eyes. "We did it." Clara nodded, leaning heavily on Marcus for support. "For now," she said, her voice hoarse. "But we have to stay vigilant. This isn't the end. It's only a reprieve." Emily approached cautiously, her hands trembling as she picked up her notebook. "Is it over?" she asked hesitantly. "For tonight," Clara replied, managing a small smile. "But we've bought ourselves some time. That's all we can ask for." As dawn broke over the horizon, the group packed up their supplies and made their way back to Clara's house. Exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but there was also a sense of accomplishment. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious, even if only temporarily. In the days that followed, life in the town began to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could get. The strange occurrences ceased, and people gradually stopped, looking over their shoulders. Adam and Ryan, still plagued by nightmares and paranoia, resigned from the police force, unable to cope with what they had witnessed. Some residents speculated that the entire ordeal had been a mass hallucination, while others believed Clara and the keepers had saved them from something far worse. Emily published her article, detailing the events leading up to the ritual and the bravery of the keepers. Though she omitted certain details to protect their identities, the story resonated with readers across the country. Letters poured in, thanking Clara and her companions for their courage and sacrifice. For Clara, Marcus, and Evelyn, the experience served as a reminder of their purpose. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. Somewhere beyond the veil, the malevolent force waited, biding its time. Until then, the keepers would remain vigilant, ready to defend humanity whenever the need arose. And so, life in the small Ohio town continued, forever changed by the events that had unfolded. Clara Williams, the elderly woman who had once been dismissed as ordinary, was now seen as a symbol of resilience and hope. Her story proved that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, strength and unity could overcome the darkest of threats. The days after the ritual passed slowly, but the town began to settle back into its usual rhythm. The strange occurrences that had terrified residents for weeks Flickering lights, eerie shadows, and unexplained noises had vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. People went about their lives grateful for the return to normalcy, though whispers of what had happened lingered in conversations at coffee shops, schools, and workplaces. Clara Williams, Marcus Johnson, and Evelyn Harper tried to blend back into their routines as best they could. They knew the danger wasn't entirely gone, but for now, the barrier between worlds was secure. Still, the weight of responsibility hung heavy on their shoulders. Each of them carried the memory of the battle in the woods, a constant reminder of the thin line separating peace from chaos. Clara spent most of her time at home, tending to her garden and reflecting on recent events. She often thought about the ancient texts she and Evelyn had studied, wondering if there were clues hidden within their pages that might prepare them for future threats. Though she didn't share these thoughts with Marcus or Evelyn, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was only temporary. Something larger loomed on the horizon, something they weren't ready to face yet. Meanwhile, Emily Dawson threw herself into writing follow-up articles about the Keepers and their role in protecting the town. Her initial piece had sparked widespread interest, drawing attention not just locally but nationally. Emails flooded her inbox, many from people claiming to have experienced similar phenomena in their own communities. Others wrote to thank her for shedding light on the courage of individuals like Clara, who risked everything to keep others safe. One email, however, stood out among the rest. It came from a man named Daniel Carter, not related to Adam Carter, one of the suspended officers, and his message sent chills down Emily's spine. "I think I know what you're dealing with," he wrote. "My family has stories passed down through generations about beings like the ones you described. If you want answers, meet me." Intrigued and slightly uneasy, Emily forwarded the email to Clara. The elderly woman read it carefully, her brow furrowing as she processed the words. "This could be important," Clara said finally. "Or it could be a trap. We need to be cautious." Despite the risks, the group decided to arrange a meeting with Daniel. He suggested a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, far enough from prying eyes to ensure privacy. When Emily arrived with Clara, Marcus, and Evelyn in tow, they found him sitting alone at a corner table, nursing a cup of coffee. Daniel was younger than any of them had expected, perhaps in his early 30s, with sharp features and piercing blue eyes. "Thank you for coming," Daniel said as they took their seats. His tone was polite but guarded, mirroring their own unease. "I imagine you have questions." "We do," Clara replied, cutting straight to the point. "What do you know about the entities we encountered?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying them intently. "They're called rift walkers," he explained. "Beings that exist in the space between dimensions. They feed on fear and chaos, using it to weaken barriers like the one you repaired. My ancestors documented their existence centuries ago, though most people dismiss the stories as myths." Evelyn frowned, flipping through the pages of her leather-bound book. "Why would they target our town specifically?" she asked. "They didn't choose your town," Daniel said. "They chose Clara." All eyes turned to her, and Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. When she awakened her powers during the confrontation at the grocery store, it created a ripple effect. The rift walkers sensed the energy and followed it here. That's why the barrier weakened so quickly. Marcus crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. "And how do you know all this?" he demanded. "My family has been tracking rift walkers for generations," Daniel admitted. "We don't have abilities like yours, but we've learned how to identify signs of their presence. I've been monitoring unusual activity in this area for months. When I saw the news about the glowing light at the store, I knew it was connected." Clara nodded slowly, absorbing the information. "If what you're saying is true, then we may need your help moving forward," she said. "But trust isn't given easily. You'll have to prove yourself." Daniel smiled faintly. "Fair enough. I'm not here to take over. I'm here to assist. If another breach happens, you'll need all the allies you can get." The group agreed to work with Daniel, albeit cautiously. Over the next few days, he shared insights from his family's research, including maps marked with locations where rift walker activity had been reported in the past. These areas formed patterns, suggesting the creatures moved in cycles, seeking weak points in the dimensional barrier. While Clara and her companions focused on preparing for potential future threats, Adam and Ryan struggled to rebuild their lives. Their resignation from the police force had left them adrift, unable to escape the trauma of their encounter with the shadowy entities. Nightmares plagued them nightly, leaving them exhausted and irritable during the day. They avoided public spaces, fearing judgment from the townspeople who had heard about their behavior toward Clara. One evening, as Adam sat alone in his apartment, staring blankly at the wall, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Ryan. "You seeing this?" Ryan's voice was tense, almost frantic. "Seeing what?" Adam asked, rubbing his temples. "The news. Turn on the TV." Adam grabbed the remote and flipped to the local station. A breaking report flashed across the screen. Strange lights had been spotted hovering over fields on the outskirts of town. Witnesses claimed the lights moved erratically, disappearing and reappearing without explanation. Some even reported hearing distant screams. "It's happening again," Ryan whispered. "The Riftwalkers, they're back." Adam's heart sank. He wanted to deny it, to believe it was just another coincidence, but deep down, he knew Ryan was right. Whatever Clara and the others had done to seal the breach hadn't lasted long enough. The entities were returning, stronger and more determined than before. Word of the sighting spread quickly, reaching Clara and her group by morning. They gathered at Clara's house, discussing their options. "We can't wait for them to attack us," Marcus said firmly. "We need to act first," Clara agreed. "Daniel's maps might give us an advantage," she said. "If we can pinpoint where they're gathering, we can reinforce the barrier before it breaks completely." With Daniel's help, they identified a cluster of farms near the edge of town as the epicenter of the disturbances. The group decided to investigate under the cover of darkness, hoping to catch the Riftwalkers off guard. Armed with protective charms and tools from their previous ritual, they set out, their nerves stretched taut. As they approached the designated location, the air grew colder, carrying an unnatural stillness. The fields stretched endlessly under, the pale moonlight silent except for the occasional rustle of grass. Suddenly, Evelyn gasped, pointing toward the horizon. A series of glowing orbs hovered above the ground, pulsating with an otherworldly light. "They're here," Clara murmured, her voice steady despite the dread coiling in her chest. The Riftwalkers materialized slowly, their shadowy forms taking shape against the night sky. Unlike before, they seemed more solid, less ephemeral, their hollow eyes locked onto the group, radiating malice. "Stay close," Clara ordered, raising her hands. The others formed a protective circle around her, channeling their energy as they had during the first ritual. Light erupted from their palms, forming a shimmering dome that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. The Riftwalkers screamed, their voices echoing like thunder. They lunged at the barrier, testing its strength, but the combined power of the Keepers held firm. For a moment, it seemed like they might succeed in driving the creatures away. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the Riftwalkers broke free, slipping through a crack in the barrier. It lunged toward Daniel, who stood slightly apart from the group, frantically consulting his maps. Before anyone could react, Marcus stepped in front of him, shielding him with his body. "No!" Clara shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. She poured every ounce of her strength into the barrier, widening it to encompass Marcus and Daniel. The Riftwalker shrieked, recoiling as the light intensified. Evelyn collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "We can't hold it much longer," she cried. Clara gritted her teeth, her vision blurring as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. But she refused to give up. Summoning reserves of energy she didn't know she had, she unleashed a final burst of power. The light surged outward, engulfing the Riftwalkers in a blinding flash. When the light faded, the fields were empty once more. The creatures were gone, banished back to their realm. The group staggered, barely able to stand. Marcus helped Daniel to his feet, both shaken but alive. "You saved us," Daniel said, his voice trembling with gratitude. Clara shook her head. "Not permanently. This fight isn't over. But tonight, we survived. As dawn broke, the group returned home, battered, but resolute. They knew the Riftwalkers would return someday stronger and more cunning. Until then, they would continue to prepare, to train, and to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And though the road ahead was uncertain, Clara took comfort in one truth. Together, they were stronger than the darkness. The days following the second battle with the Riftwalkers were a blur of exhaustion and reflection for Clara Williams, Marcus Johnson, Evelyn Harper, and their new ally, Daniel Carter. Though they had managed to drive the creatures back once, again, the victory felt hollow. The Keepers knew that each confrontation weakened the barrier between worlds, making it easier for the Riftwalkers to breach it in the future. The question wasn't if they would return, it was when. Clara spent hours poring over ancient texts, searching for answers. Her small living room became cluttered with books, maps, and notes scrawled on scraps of paper. She worked tirelessly, her mind racing as she tried to piece together strategies to strengthen the barrier permanently. Evelyn joined her often, offering insights from her own research. Together they uncovered references to a ritual called the Binding, a powerful ceremony said to seal dimensional breaches for generations. But the ritual came with a cost. It required immense energy and unity among those performing it. If even one person faltered, the entire effort could fail. Marcus, too, threw himself into preparation. He used his skills as a mechanic to craft tools designed to amplify the Keeper's abilities. Working in his garage late into the night, he fashioned intricate devices using crystals, copper wiring, and fragments of meteorite, a material rumored to hold protective properties. His hands moved with precision, driven by a determination to ensure the group was ready for whatever came next. Daniel proved invaluable in gathering intelligence. Using his family's records and connections, he identified patterns in Riftwalker activity across the country. These patterns suggested that the creatures operated in cycles, targeting specific locations during times of heightened human emotion, fear, anger, or despair. By understanding these cycles, the group hoped to anticipate the next attack and strike preemptively. Emily Dawson continued documenting their efforts, her articles serving as both a record of their struggles and a warning to others. She interviewed townspeople, capturing their accounts of the strange events that had unfolded. Many expressed gratitude toward Clara and the Keepers, though some remained skeptical, dismissing the stories as exaggerations or outright fabrications. Despite the criticism, Emily persisted, knowing the importance of spreading awareness about the unseen threats lurking beyond the veil. As preparations intensified, so did the tension in the town. Adam and Ryan, still reeling from their earlier encounters with the Riftwalkers, became increasingly isolated. Their nightmares worsened, leaving them physically and emotionally drained. They began avoiding daylight altogether, retreating to dimly lit corners of bars where they drowned their fears in alcohol. Though no one spoke of it openly, rumors circulated that the officers were losing their grip on reality. One evening, as Clara sat by her window watching the sun dip below the horizon, she received an unexpected visitor. It was Adam Carter, his face pale and drawn, his eyes bloodshot. He hesitated at the door, clearly unsure of how to begin. "Clara," he said finally, his voice hoarse, "I need your help." Clara studied him for a moment before stepping aside to let him in. She offered him a seat and a cup of tea, sensing that whatever he had come to say was important. Adam fidgeted nervously, his hands trembling around the mug. "I don't know what's happening to us," he admitted. "Ryan and we can't sleep. We hear things, voices, whispers, that no one else can. And the shadows." He trailed off, shaking his head. "They're everywhere. Following us, watching us." Clara listened quietly, her expression compassionate but firm. "You brought this on yourselves," she said gently. "Your actions at the store awakened something you weren't prepared to face. But blaming yourselves won't change anything. What matters now is finding a way to move forward." Adam looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "You'd help us?" After everything we did? Clara nodded. This isn't about revenge, it's about survival, for all of us. If the Rift Walkers are affecting you this strongly, it means they're growing stronger. We can't afford to leave anyone behind. With Adam's cooperation, Clara arranged a meeting with Ryan. Both men were reluctant at first, but desperation drove them to accept her offer. Under her guidance, they underwent a cleansing ritual designed to rid them of the lingering influence of the Rift Walkers. The process was draining for everyone involved, but by the end, Adam and Ryan reported feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. Though the ritual helped, it didn't erase the guilt they carried. Determined to make amends, Adam and Ryan approached the town council, publicly apologizing for their behavior and pledging to support initiatives aimed at fostering unity and understanding within the community. Their apology was met with mixed reactions, but it marked the beginning of their journey toward redemption. Meanwhile, Clara and her companions finalized plans for the binding. They chose a secluded location deep within the woods, far from prying eyes. On the eve of the ritual, the group gathered under a sky filled with stars, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of candles arranged in a wide circle. Clara stood at the center, flanked by Marcus, Evelyn, and Daniel. Adam and Ryan joined them, their presence symbolizing the fragile bond that had begun to form between the keepers and the rest of the town. Clara raised her hands, her voice steady as she recited the incantation passed down through generations. The air crackled with energy, and the ground beneath their feet hummed with power. One by one, the others added their voices, their words blending into a harmonious chant. Light erupted from the circle, spiraling upward like a beacon. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire forest held its breath. Then, with a final surge of energy, the light expanded outward, sealing the dimensional breach once and for all. The Rift Walkers screamed in defiance, their forms dissolving into nothingness as the barrier solidified. When the light faded, silence fell over the clearing, broken only by the sound of breathing. Exhausted but triumphant, the group embraced one another, tears streaming down their faces. They had done it. They had protected not just their town, but the world from a threat few could comprehend. As dawn broke, they made their way back home, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that their work was never truly finished. In the weeks that followed, life in the small Ohio town returned to normal. The strange occurrences ceased entirely, and people began to forget the fear that had gripped them. Clara, Marcus, Evelyn, and Daniel continued their work quietly, ever vigilant for signs of trouble. Adam and Ryan found purpose in mentoring young recruits at the police academy, teaching them the value of compassion and respect. Emily published her final article, chronicling the Keeper's ultimate victory and the lessons learned along the way. Her words resonated deeply, inspiring readers to look beyond appearances and recognize the strength in unity. Though she never revealed the full extent of the Keeper's powers, her story served as a testament to the courage and resilience of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. For Clara, the experience reinforced her belief in the importance of standing up against injustice, no matter the cost. She knew the world would always need protectors, those willing to step into the darkness so others could live in the light. And while the road ahead remained uncertain, she faced it with hope, knowing she wasn't alone. As the seasons changed, and the town moved forward, Clara Williams became a legend, not because of her abilities, but because of her unwavering commitment to doing what was right. Her story reminded everyone that even in the face of overwhelming odds, kindness, courage, and unity could spark change and sometimes miracles.